is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 402. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from sunny Florida, it's Ben Stark. Ben, welcome back to the show. How goes?
It goes pretty well, and it sure is sunny. I literally am soaked in sweat just from walking to and from a Starbucks at 6 p.m.
Look, man, you choose where you live. You know, this is a choice. But you like it down there, right?
Yeah, I do. Although there's a good chance I'm actually moving to D.C., so maybe it'll be a little less sunny.
Oh, boy. Oh, everybody's moving to D.C. I like that. Ben is on the show this week. Luis could not be here. He needed a week off, so we nabbed Ben, and I'm excited to have him back on the show. Always fun to have Ben as a guest on the show. We've got a ton of awesome questions that we're going to use as discussion points as we go through from our listeners. Before we get into all that, I want to mention our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com. That's right, the place to go on the internet for everything you need Magic related. They've got it. If you need singles, they're going to have it. If you need sealed product or supplies or anything like that for Magic, you're going to find it at Channel Fireball. And while you're there, awesome free content. That's right, videos, articles from some of the best players and content producers in the world, all for free every single day at channelfireball.com. Please do check out that. If you need Magic stuff, they're the place to go. Trust me, channelfireball.com, they will not let you down. Also, the show is brought to you directly by you via the Patreon. That's right, patreon.com/limited resources. Thank you so much to everybody who helps support the show and keep things moving forward. And we've got some cool giveaways coming up. I, in fact, have received shipping confirmation for something I'll give away probably next week on the show. You're not going to want to miss that one. A pretty cool item. And I'll talk about that then when I actually get it in my hands, just to be sure. But yes, we love giving stuff back to you. And if you want to check out more, again, it's patreon.com/limited resources. Anybody that's a patron is automatically entered into any of our giveaways. And also, you get access to the Patreon feed, among other things, which gives you the ability to ask questions for the question of the week, which we're going to do in just a second. And also, sometimes when I have guests on and I want to pick your brain as the listener about what you want to talk to the guests about, I'll put up a thread kind of last minute and say, hey, you guys got any questions for our guest? And I did that tonight, and we've got a ton of great questions from our listeners. I'm consistently blown away with the level of questions that they come up with time and time again. So thank you so much to everybody on the Patreon, patreon.com/limited resources. And that does bring us to our Patreon question of the week. This one comes from David, who says, this exact scenario came up at the DreamHack main event. Pack 1, solidly in red-green, and getting past good red-green cards in each pick, 2 Ambuscades, an Open Fire, Aronis' Stalwart, Kenra Scrapper, etc. Pack 2 contains a Scarab God and a few solid red-green commons. How good does your deck need to be to not pick the God, or conversely, how bad does it need to be to pick the God? What's your take on that, Ben? That's one of the more powerful cards in the whole set, but it's firmly out of color for where you're at.
Right. Well, if you figured that you couldn't splash the Scarab God into a red-green deck at all, I would not even think about taking the Scarab God. If I'm seeing red-green in pack 1 and I've got a good red-green deck, I'm not going to drop one or both of the colors just to be able to play this card. Especially in this case, it's pretty much both. This format's a little interesting because green has a lot of fixing. Traveler's Amulet exists, Evolving Wilds exists. So it's really not that hard if you go out of your way to draft the fixing aggressively to even just toss Scarab God into a red-green deck sometimes, weird as that may seem. But as a general question, I would say ignore the Scarab God. I would literally take a 2-mana 2/2 over it and just pass it right along. In this particular format, especially if you already got a fixing or two pack 1 and you know you can take them the rest of the draft, I might take the Scarab God and try and splash it, unless there's an actual good red or green card for me. Not broken, not on the level of Scarab God, but if there's an Ambuscade or an Open Fire, I'm just going to take that, and I'm not going to splash the Scarab God. But if it's just a really medium playable, I might take the Scarab God and try and prioritize fixing and try and splash it into my red-green deck.
Okay. Yeah, it's always an interesting scenario when you find a tough-to-splash card, but it's so powerful, right? One of the best cards in the whole set. All right, let's crack a pack here, Ben. This one comes from David. I met David at Grand Prix Minneapolis. Thank you, David, for the pack. Very kind of you. All right, let's see what we've got here. First card out is Firebrand Archer.
Okay, solid 2-drop. Hopefully we're not first picking it. That would be awful.
That's what I was thinking too. Solitary Camel. This guy can get lifelink to 3/2.
Very underrated 3-drop. It's a 3/2 lifelink for 3 in a format where the creatures are not that big. Has the potential to pretty easily gain 3, 6, 9 life. That's just a lot, and a 3/2 for 3 is not an unreasonable body. So I think this card is actually better than people think, but it would still be an awful first pick, and I really hope we don't have to first pick it.
Yeah, I don't think we do. Disposal Mummy. That's a pretty bad one. Huh?
Way worse than the Camel.
Yeah.
Barely playable.
What about Kenra Eternal? That's the 1 in a black 2/2 with Afflict 1.
Also worse than the Camel. Half the time or so in this format, black should not be aggressive at all. Black can kind of go either way. And even when you are going aggressive, you're going to play that card, but it's just a Grizzly Bear, and there's plenty of that. I don't think it's an exciting card at all.
Speaking of Grizzly Bear, here's the strictly worse version of Kenra Eternal. It's Defiant Kenra, the 2/2 for 1 in a red.
Yeah, that's the worst of the 3 2-drops. I would rather have the Firebrand Archer that pings them and give up the toughness than the extra point of toughness but lose the ping ability.
Right. Now, what about this next one? This is a card that I found kind of interesting because the opinions seem to be a bit varied. It's Harrier Naga, the 2 in a green 3/3.
Yeah, it's a solid 3-drop. Nothing special. The thing is, if you're a green beatdown deck, that's a really solid 3-drop. But if you're a green ramp deck, you don't even really want that card.
Right.
And green does fixing and ramp really well in this format, as we touched on when we were discussing the opening the Scarab God in Pack 2. So, a lot of your decks just don't want that card. I personally, out of this pack so far, would probably take the Solitary Camel. I think it's a better card than the Naga. I think you definitely want to give up that point of toughness for lifelink, and it's pretty easy to have your deserts on if you're prioritizing them. So I see it as like a mediocre 3-drop. Solid, you're always going to play it if you're an aggressive deck, but it's pretty much barely to unplayable if you're a ramp deck.
This next one I thought would see more play, but the format has played out significantly differently than I thought it would when I had only seen the cards for it. It's Jeru's Renunciation. That's the 1 in a white instant, tap up to 2 target creatures, but you can also just cycle it away for a white. I think maybe somebody played this against me once or twice. Like, it just doesn't see play.
Yeah, so, I probably like that card a little more than most people because of cycling 1. The thing is, though, your biggest fear whenever you're an aggro deck is that you're going to flood out. So throwing cycling on a spell that isn't very powerful, that you're looking to cycle maybe about half the time that you draw it, kind of isn't great because it leads to flood out. It's really cool that if you have an exactly 2 or 3 land hand and you get to curve out and then play that card for the win, whereas if you draw only 1 land, in your aggressive deck, you can keep and cycle that, and then you probably have 2 lands to start putting out your 2-drops, and that part is cool. But ultimately, you don't want to cycle it very much because it's going to lead to flood out, and this is a very aggressive card, and if it didn't have cycling, it would be unplayable. So really, even when you put them together, you just get a very unimpressive card.
It's really interesting that you say that because that is a sort of an unforeseen consequence, I think, that people, at least initially, didn't fully embrace, was the idea that when you cycle away a spell, it's actually incrementally throwing the spell to land ratio further and further towards lands for the rest of the cards in your deck, making it more likely that you draw more lands. And I think that, like you said, at face value, you think, oh, sweet, it's conditional, right? There's times when this is the best card that will win me the game. And there's a lot of times where it doesn't really do much. And you think, well, I'll just cycle it, no problem. And that equation, was kind of where we left it, in many ways. Like, well, that's good. Then I can just do that. But like you said, each time you do that, you are skewing your deck a little further and further towards having more lands. And in these aggressive decks, that's death, right? That often means that you're losing the game if you draw too many lands.
That's a huge problem for an aggressive deck. I much prefer a cycler like Wing Shepherd, where, if I have a little bit of a land heavy hand, then I know I've got a 3/3 flyer that maybe can finish them off. And if I only have a 1-lander, then I can cycle it. But a card that you're just going to have to cycle a lot on turn 4 or 5 even because of the fact that it's just not effective on this board, you're not turning it into a new spell. You're turning it into 0.6 of a spell because 40% of your deck is land. And, flooding out is definitely the biggest problem for aggro decks now and always. So, you can't really play – you want cards like Wing Shepherd where if you have 4 or 5 lands, now you have a good card. And if you drew a 1-lander or a 2-lander, then you can cycle it. You don't really want situational cards that you have to cycle a lot in your aggro decks.
Next card is one that's performed well for me. It's Unsummon. Where are you at on
Unsummon is good.
Ben? Yeah, do you like it?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good cheap trick. Blue is often a prowess aggro deck, whether that's blue-red primarily or sometimes blue-black or blue-white. Unsummon is, a good tempo card. You can save your own creatures. There's a lot of removal. You can get blowouts in combat when your opponents use a trick. Trades up a lot of mana. It's not a card you want to have a lot of necessarily in your deck, but I feel like the first copy or two are pretty powerful. Yeah,
I do too. Also, just given the way that creature interaction works, is that it's generally expensive, right? You can expect to spend easily 3 to 4 mana to be able to kill or tap or, do something with your opponent's creature. And even though, Unsummon doesn't replace removal directly in the sense that it doesn't actually solve the problem that you're facing. If you're patient and you can, make sure to wait for the right moment, an Unsummon, it's the cheapest way to interact with an opposing creature that you're going to get. And
yeah, I'd like to point out that I think this is not a very tempo-oriented format. I don't think you generally want to be on summoning their 4-drop and playing a 3-drop just to double spell and get a little further ahead. I think that's generally going to be really bad.
Exactly.
But the reason I think Unsummon is quite good is because there's a bunch of removal. Some of it's pretty expensive. There's a bunch of combat tricks. And, when you unsummon their 3-drop when they play their pump spell, you effectively trade it with their pump spell and their 3-drop goes back to their hand. So you net 2 mana and counter their pump spell. Or when you unsummon your own creature in response to removal and you save your best creature and it only costs 1 mana. And then, of course, sometimes, I'm not saying never just bounce their creature to attack, but, sometimes they missed a spot on their curve already. You're way ahead. They tap their 5 for their, 4/4 Archer Vigilance or something. You unsummon it and hit them for 7 or something. Then it can do that too.
Yeah.
So unsummon tends to be a pretty flexible card. Save your own creature from removal, bounce their creature when they use a combat spell, or bounce their big creature in alpha. So all in all, you get a lot for 1 mana.
Yeah, that's the bargain basement price. All right, this is an important question, and I'm glad that we opened this in this pack, because I want to get your take on it. This is Desert of the Mindful. So this is the blue cycling desert. Where are you at on the deserts? How high do you take them?
I like them. I think Flood Out has always been one of the biggest ways to lose in Limited. I think the Desert's On mechanic is pretty powerful. There's a big difference with Unquenchable Thirst when you're tapping something or when you're not.
Yep.
I take that card pretty aggressively. It's probably the card I would take out of this pack so far.
Yeah.
Previous to opening it, Unsummon would probably be the card I would take out of this pack if I remember the whole pack correctly. Mm-hmm. And I think right now the Blue Desert is probably the card I would take first out of the pack so far.
Okay. By the way, I'm just loving that we opened this pack because a big debate that on Twitter this week was around this next card, Manalith.
I would not take Manalith out of this pack.
Okay, so what's your thoughts on Manalith? Because there were some pros and some online grinders that were advocating very heavily for taking, for prioritizing Manalith, which I have not been doing as far.
Yeah, I think Ramp and Control are good in this format. I think that I'm happy to play 1 Manalith in those decks, but there's even other 3-mana ramp cards, even commons, even for the same casting cost 3 mana that are just better. Mm-hmm. Like, I would much rather have the green and 2 search your library for a land.
Beneath the Sands, yeah.
Yeah, because that one has cycling, so if you draw a land heavy hand, you get to cycle away your land, so it's almost like a cycling desert. Right. Whereas, Manalith doesn't, so if you draw a land heavy hand and a Manalith, you've just got even more lands that you don't need. Mm-hmm. Also, I think there's pretty heavily diminishing returns on the number of Manaliths you want in your deck. I think multiple Manalith draws are going to be really bad. So the first copy is a lot better than the second copy. The second copy is a lot better than the third copy. Each additional copy of Manalith in your deck makes the other copies a lot worse.
Right.
So the idea of first picking a Manalith to me is madness. It's not an unplayable card. I like Ramp. I like Control. I will happily play 1 to 2 Manaliths in all my Ramp and Control decks. But Manalith would not be one of the top 3 cards I would take out of this pack, and we haven't even gotten to the uncommons yet.
Madness. I love it. All right. Uncommons are here, though. First one up, solid card, Steward of Solidarity. 1 and a white, 2/2. You can tap and exert it to make a 1/1 warrior.
Yeah, I like this card. I will admit, it's not as good as I thought it would be.
Me too. I gave it a very high grade in the set review, and it's been very good, but not mind-blowing.
Right. It's still, the best card we've opened in this pack so far. I think I would take it over the Blue Desert. but it's not a super exciting uncommon. It's a bear with upside, and that's going to always be good enough for an aggro deck. But honestly, sometimes I'm not even sure if I want to make that 1/1 or just attack them for 2. And it's just not that powerful to put out 1/1s in the mid game. Like a 1/1 every other turn on turn 4 and turn 6 just isn't doing a whole lot. So, I mean, there are some games where your opponent has 1 toughness creatures and, you have late game and it's powerful that you make a 1/1 with it. But there are other games where I think it's often right to just attack them with it on turn 3 and 4. And then your bear just starts producing 1/1s instead of being totally blanked. Now, that's a good card. That's a card I want in my deck. But it's not super exciting.
Yeah, that's where I came down to. Next one is Liliana's Defeat, which is the black version of the defeats. It's a black sorcery. It destroys a black creature, a black planeswalker, and if it happened to be a Liliana, you lose. They lose 3 life. These cards have proven to be very solid sideboard cards.
Yeah, and I'm not first picking it, but I think those are undervalued. When you're boarding in 1 mana kill a creature, that's really, really good in limited.
Yeah.
And there's only 5 colors, and people usually play 2 of them. So you have a pretty, decent chance to bring it in. It's not like an obscure sideboard card that is an answer to one thing. It's an answer to one of the 5 colors in Magic, and your opponent's usually playing 2 of the 5. Right. So I think that these are way undervalued. You almost always end up with enough playables these days. So I'll always take any of the defeats that kill a creature way over a dead average playable. I'll take them pretty highly. I mean, I wouldn't first pick it. I would take the Steward over it. Like out of this pack, I would definitely take the Steward over it, the Blue Cycling Desert, and On Summon. That might be about it, though. I'm not sure if I would take
you would,
that.
You would take it over Kenra Eternal, for example, Harrier Naga,
definitely.
Firebrand Archer,
Definitely.
That kind of stuff, right?
Definitely. It's pretty close with the Camel, in my opinion, as far as where I want to be drafting it.
Okay. Last uncommon is Burning Fist Minotaur. That's the 1 in a red 2/1 with first strike, and you can pay 1 in a red and discard a card to give it +2/+0 until end of turn.
Yeah, and that's what I would take so far out of this pack. It's a good uncommon. Yeah, and it's actually in a recent Pick 1 Pack 1 article I did, that was one of the 2 cards I said I would take first or second out of the pack, and I also described it as a weak first pick. And a lot of people kind of question that, saying like, well, if it's better than any common and it's a good card, how can it be a weak first pick? But, in this format, so many of the rares are broken. Yeah. And then you have...
Hold on a second and you'll get to that part, by the way.
Yeah, and then you also have a bunch of uncommons that are broken or borderline broken. You have cards like, Sand Strangler and Banewhip Punisher that are broken, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then you have cards like Desert's Hold and Omnisphinx and a Braid and the red-green split card, I think it's called Struggle Assault or something. Those are...
Struggle to Survive, yeah.
Yeah, those are all, really good cards. Not broken, but 5 mana 4/4 flyer with upside, really efficient, good removal. I mean, these are cards that, you want to be first picking. 2 mana 2/1 first strike, tough to block. It's nice, but ultimately it still gets punished by all the things that punish 1 toughness creatures. If your opponent has up big creatures to throw in front of it, how many cards do you have to discard? If they happen to have a cheap removal, they may get to 2 for 1 you. Yeah. I mean, it's a good card. You know what I mean? It's better than any of the other cards in this pack. It's a clear first pick out of this pack. I think it's slightly better than Open Fire, which I think is the best common. But I think it's a weak first pick, and I don't think it's an exciting card.
So if you open up Burning Fist Minotaur and Open Fire, you are in the Burning Fist Minotaur side of that equation?
Pick 1 Pack 1. I think I Burning Fist Minotaur. I think it's really close.
It's so close, right? I've actually had this pick 2 different times.
Yeah, the problem is if you end up wanting to splash, Open Fire could be a good splash into a green deck, and Burning Fist Minotaur is going to be a terrible splash.
Right.
If you end up red aggro, Burning Fist Minotaur is substantially better than Open Fire. So it's a really close Pick 1 Pack 1, but I think that they're both, a little above replacement. They help you win, but they're not exciting cards. That's how I would describe them. Yeah,
I took Open Fire both times, but I agonized over it as well. I thought, well, I could flip a coin and feel like I was fine here. My reasoning was that I like the blue-red deck quite a bit, and Open Fire's really great part of that equation. Burning Fist Minotaur is obviously good in it as well. But being a spell is more relevant for that. And then also what you said about splashing it's just such a higher upside splash than Burning Fist Minotaur, so that edged me over. But I didn't feel I'm just like, those are my reasons. And it's kind of one of those things where I could call you and you could give me more reasons, and that could change my mind very easily. It's just kind of where I landed, you know.
I think the second reason is really the solid one, because the blue-red aggro deck, though it does want spells to trigger prowess and a few key cards, it also wants quality 2 drops because it's an aggressive deck, and there just aren't that many good ones. But the fact that if you end up with like a green-blue ramp deck with some fixing, you're going to play Open Fire and it's going to be a good splash, and you're not going to play Burning Fist Minotaur and it's not going to be a good splash.
That's a huge gap.
Yeah, so pick one, pack one. I could even though the Burning Fist Minotaur might be the better red card, I can definitely see the Open Fire just because it's so splashable.
All right, well, how about we put all of this conversation to bed, because our rare is Angel of Condemnation.
Is that the 4-mana 3/3 flying angel?
That's the one.
Yeah, I mean that's the pick out of this pack clearly. It's a broken card. It's funny because there's so many good broken rares in this set that it doesn't even come across to me as one of the top rares.
No, when you say broken, what do you mean? I mean you're using some hyperbole here, right?
I mean it's not a very precise word, but I mean I would say
I'm like I want you to translate it because like I've talked to you enough to know what you mean when you say broken rare, but like what do you mean?
I don't know. Probably something like if you play it turn 4, in this case, because it's a 4-mana card, you're going to win the game like 75% of the time.
It just jumps your win percentage that much, 20% jump or whatever,
Yeah, it just has a massive impact on the game. I mean, you know, the downside of this one is it dies to a lot of removal, and it doesn't have an effect if it dies. But if it doesn't die, you virtually can't lose. So, I mean, when I say broken, I mean basically takes over the game, swings the game wildly. You know, that's why, like, I would call a card like Sand Strangler broken, because if your opponent plays a 3 or 4 drop and then your 4 drop kills it, you're going to win that game a massive percentage of the time, maybe 70, 75, whatever. But I wouldn't call a card like Desert's Hold broken, because if your opponent plays a 3 or 4 drop and you kill it and gain 3 life, you're going to win that game a little over 50% of the time. That created value. It has what I call value over replacement, but it's not broken. You're not winning the game. You know, you're not winning the game 75% of the time, all other things even, because you cast that card. You know, of course, Desert's Hold's value is more in terms of stopping bombs and things like that, but then you're holding it and the game's going, and maybe they have a bomb, maybe they don't, and, you know, it's a good card. It's a very good card, but it's not broken. Right. You know, Sand Strangler is broken. Angel of what's the name?
Angel of Condemnation.
Angel of Condemnation is broken. These are cards that if you play them on curve most games, they're going to wildly swing the game. They're going to give you a much higher chance to win.
I love that. You know, I view it as like the cards in the pack are all vying to try to get the Ben Stark seal of brokenness. You know, they're just like, am I broken? No, you're not broken. You're close though. But Angel of Condemnation definitely in there. And I would certainly take it out of that pack.
Oh, it's a Windmill Slim in this pack. It's way better than Burning Fist Minotaur.
Right. Okay, let's get into our questions. We've got a decent number of questions here from our patrons. Once again, thank you so much for those questions. They're very good. All right, let's get into these. And again, Ben, I want to use these as like a discussion springboard. So we can go kind of any direction we want with them. This first one comes from Weston, who says, what if every card had Cycling 2?
Magic would be a much better game.
This is a cool question, right? Like, what if all of them had it? So what is your take on it? You think that Magic would be a better game? Why? How would it change?
I don't think Magic would be a better game. I think Magic would be a much better game.
Ooh.
Because I think the biggest flaws, I mean, I'm not saying there wouldn't be problems maybe with Legacy, with combos or something. I don't know. I basically only think from a limited perspective. So
let's just assume that Weston's, by the way, I appreciate that about you. Let's assume that Weston is asking us, what if every card had Cycling 2 for limited?
For limited, yeah. Like, I think that the limited, you play a lot of really sweet games of Magic, but the biggest problem with limited is, you know, your mana, your land spell ratios aren't what they are in Constructed, when you get to just choose whatever you want. So a lot of games in limited, you just don't draw one of your colors, or you get stuck on 3, or you flood out. So if both your lands and your spells all had 2 mana cycling, that's a real cost. It's not like aggro just doesn't work because your opponent, you know, never gets stuck and never gets punished. If they have to spend 2 turns paying 2 mana while you're adding to the board, they're still going to lose a lot of the time.
Yeah, we learned that in Amonkhet big time, right? I mean, that cycling ended up being quite a liability in such a fast format.
Exactly. But in the late game, a lot of games just come down to, one person drew 11 lands and one person only drew 8, and the person who draws 8 just wins. And, if your lands had cycling, that would be great. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, same thing with spells, because it's just a different form of that same variance. If you draw a 2/2 drops and a 3-drop on turns 6 through 8 on an even board, and your opponent draws 2 4-drops and a 6-drop, like, they're going to beat you every time. So, cycling presents a lot of interesting choices. It's an even board. Do I cycle this 3-mana 3/2 or do I play it? If every card literally had cycling, you would actually hack through your library in some of these spots. But then again, that's just more interesting choices, because what if I deck? You know what I mean? If I'm cycling away all my 2 and 3 drops, I get to my 4-drop, then they remove it, and then maybe I go on a deck because I've cycled so many times. I think Magic would be much more skill intensive. I think you would play a lot more real games. I think cycling is the best mechanic they've ever made. I think it should be evergreen. I'm not actually proposing every card have cycling, but evergreen is what they call mechanics that are in every set, right?
Yeah.
I think that it should be evergreen. I think that every set should have 10 cards with cycling. I think every limited format should have cycling lands. I think the cycling deserts are just awesome for limited.
I do too. They're so sweet. Yeah. Here's a question. Who are you representing when you think about these problems, these possible solutions or problems to this? Are you representing like professional players, or like Magic as an entity, or like limited players in general?
Well, definitely limited players in general. Like I said, I almost never think about how things will affect Constructed. To me, Constructed is more like this chore that I have to do because I love Magic. But Limited is the only time. Limited is basically the only thing that really matters.
You're home, Ben. You're home.
But as far as like, people often say, well, of course you'd say that because you'd win more games, and it's probably true that my win percentage would go slightly up if that was the case. But the thing is, there's not that much money at stake in Magic tournaments, and ultimately, I don't play this game to win 62% of my matches compared to 58. And I really don't think most of the players who would lose a couple more percent if it was like that, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference, for their Magic careers, whether they won 40% or 43% of their games. Ultimately, we play this game for fun. We play this game because it's the best strategy game ever made, and because we want to play close, fun, interesting games where our decisions are meaningful. I would always rather win than lose. But, what's more important than winning and losing is playing meaningful games, fun games where my decisions matter, where I get to think about the game. So I'm not really representing myself or other people. My mindset is always, how can Magic be the most fun, the most strategic, the most interesting? And I get people can have fun different ways. So, if your idea of fun is, chalking up W's as your opponent's discarding while you're, pummeling them and playing a non-interactive game, then I'm not representing you. My idea of fun is meaningful decisions, is thinking about, do I cycle this or do I play it? Do I attack or hold this back to block? Do I double block or is it too risky? To me, what's fun is making close, hard, strategical decisions and having those decisions matter. Having those, if I get it right, I have a higher chance to win. If I get it wrong, I have a higher chance to lose.
That's awesome. Yeah. The thing that comes to my mind about it is the possible upsides and downsides from a game perspective are possible upsides. Some of them are, well, how you were saying that it probably wouldn't really affect that, it wouldn't have like such a big profound effect on everything. You could think to yourself, well, if you make it more skill intensive, you could lose some number of players, right? Because it feels like it's too overwhelming or too complicated for them and they might not play. But the flip side of that coin is very strong, which is that you also do lose players who get frustrated at the way that the game works with not drawing enough lands or drawing too many lands, and they just go, screw this. I'm going to go play basketball instead. And you may retain some of those that you wouldn't. So, we can't obviously tell exactly how that would affect things, but
yeah, for sure, when I talk about what I think will make for the best games of Magic, I'm not talking about how to grow Magic or shrink Magic. I'm talking about how to make Magic the most strategic game where your decisions are meaningful and you have interesting hard decisions. That's what appeals to me about the game.
Weston says, thank you, Marshall Luis, and special guest Ben, for the incredible content. You're welcome, Weston. Thanks for the question. Next one comes from Anthony, who says, how do you feel that Limited helps you improve other areas of your skill as a Magic player?
Limited helps you improve a ton as a player because you have to switch roles, you have to be aggressive, you have to be defensive, you have to be drafting an aggressive deck, but understand these turns I need to play defensive and then I need to switch. I've known a lot of players who have primarily only played Constructed and, just a few drafts here and there when they had to, and they always play the same style of deck in Constructed, aggro decks, control decks. So then in Limited, they don't play Magic well because, you can't always be aggressive, you can't always be defensive. So I feel like what Limited does is it forces you to understand how to think on the fly, how to understand when to switch roles. One of the hardest things I think that really separates the best players, especially in Limited where this constantly comes up, is I'll see them have an aggressive deck against an opponent with a deck with better late game, and they'll be playing aggressive the whole game. And then there'll just be a turn where they don't make the aggressive play, where they play very defensively, because on that turn, there were just a lot of things that would have punished them for playing aggressive. And suddenly, they've been aggressive on turn 4, 5, and 6, but here on turn 7, they need to be defensive. And then maybe on turn 8, they get to go back to being aggressive once the opponent plays their last card, or they add whatever they had to the board. But you have to, by playing Limited, you're forced to constantly evaluate the board and understand what's going to be best that turn. Yeah. And by playing Constructed only, I feel like a lot of times you're just always in the same role. When I'm playing Burn and you're playing Control, I'm always trying to deal you as much damage as I can. I mean, always might be a hyperbole, but it's 99% or 98% or something.
Yeah, you're never taking the control route in that matchup. You're never switching roles, right? Right.
And when you're the control deck in Constructed, it's often the case. And I don't want to be too hyperbolic. It's probably not 99 or 98 even, but it's very, very, very often the case. But when you're the aggro deck in Limited, you're not Burn, you're not really that, you're not White Weenie, you're not really the aggro deck. You just have a little bit more of an aggressive deck than your opponents. So maybe 70% of the time you're making the aggressive play. A very substantial percentage of the time you need to play defensive. Right. And so I feel like Limited really enhances your skill because it trains you to constantly think about what's going to create the most value and not just I'm the aggro player or I'm the control player,
Yeah, and from my perspective too, I see Limited as a microcosm of Constructed in many ways, which is kind of strange. But when you think about it, when you draft a deck or put together a sealed deck, you're doing a mini version of what people do when they build Constructed decks, which is they look at a card pool, a bigger one, and they take the cards that they want to play from that card pool for their Constructed deck. Now, they have more agency there, obviously, because they can just pick whichever ones they want. But it's similar, right? You're culling a certain subset of cards from a bigger subset of cards. Then you're building your deck, and that's something that you have to do in Constructed as well. You have to figure out the right ratio for lands. You have to make sure your mana works. You have to make sure that you have all the pieces that you're looking for. And in Limited, you're trying to do that. You don't always succeed at it, but you're similarly trying to do that, and you're exhibiting some skill sets that overlap at the least. And then you're playing, right? And it's the same thing, like you said, in Constructed, it tends to be more siloed, but in Limited, it's a very wide range. You have to be able to change gears on a dime. And that's something that is like Constructed, but even more broad. And I think that you can certainly pick up some level of skill from each of those phases of playing a Limited tournament and apply them to how you would approach building a deck and or playing a deck for Constructed. Anthony had a follow-up question. So, his first one was, how do we feel that it helps you improve in other areas of your skill? He says, how about in real life?
And that's a really interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting for you because I know you well, Ben. And I mean, it is how you live your life. I mean, you apply similar frameworks that you do to Magic and poker and other games to, life decisions, right? When it comes to deciding financial things and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I started playing Magic when I was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And, I won my first PTQ when I was 15. I was already playing competitively then. So for me, I don't really have a good frame of reference for what life is like not playing Magic. But
that's crazy to think of it that way. That makes perfect sense.
But I know that, when you're playing Magic, you're constantly thinking, logically, you're constantly doing cost-benefit analyses, and you're constantly, critical thinking, is this worth it? You're not thinking, do I want to do this? You're thinking, is this worth it all the time? Mm-hmm. And certainly, I think this is what you were talking about. That's how I think about things in my regular life, too. I constantly do, a mini cost-benefit analysis of every decision. I think, is this worth it? Is this a good choice? What are the risks? What are the rewards? not is this something I feel like doing or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, I would guess as a whole, everybody might vary, but successful gamers are going to be trained to think that way because that's just how games work. And I think it's a good skill. I think that, of course, there's happy mediums, there's going too far with good concepts, but as a whole, I think in life, you want to think like you do in Magic, like what are the risks and rewards? Is this a good choice? Is it worth it? Not, not just follow your whims or, however you're feeling that day. So I think basically Magic trains you to make decisions well, and I think that carries over to real life.
Yeah, I do too. For me, it becomes a question of, so you have your framework, like you said, your cost-benefit analysis. You're looking at things kind of in an economic standpoint. I don't mean monetary. I mean like as an economist, right? And when you make these decisions, though, you're allowed to put in whatever variables and inputs you want. Like, for example, if, you might think, well, that sounds kind of dry. Like, let's say I'm deciding if I should go to the lake today, right, and go swimming. And you think, well, it would cost me this much in gas and I might, have a 10% chance of, getting injured or something, just whatever, like all these numbers and you're just like, well, what the hell? Well, one of the things that you can factor into your equation is I really just want to go, right? Like it's something that I want a lot. Right? Like it matters to me that I get to go out to this lake and go swimming because I think it would make me happier. Right? Like I haven't done it. This is even though that's like, yeah, exactly. Right. That's what I'm saying. Like you can factor those things in.
Well, you should factor those things in. Like if I were making that decision, right, I would think like, how much bad time, let's say, like how much effort is there to do it? Like, is it an hour drive or a 20-minute drive or a 2-hour drive? What are the odds of getting injured? What are the costs to do it? Right? Cost benefit. Mm-hmm. But then I would also think, what are the benefits? Well, it's a lot of fun. Like, how much more fun is it than, if I stay home and play Moto or whatever? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, it's not, in this case, I'm going to end up not doing it because nothing is more fun than staying home and playing Moto. But for some
you broke your example.
But some people, some weird people, would enjoy going out to a lake and doing water sports and things more than playing Magic on the computer. So for them, they shouldn't just because they enjoy it go and do it, nor should they not do it. They should think, I think they should think, what are the costs? And then how much more fun is it than staying home and playing Magic or whatever? Mm-hmm. And then you can come to a rational decision when you think about, the benefit, how fun it is, and the cost to make it happen.
See, there you go. It's easy. Thanks for the question, Anthony. Ed says, hey, Ben and Marshall, if I have 2 converted mana cost cards of different power level, should I play out the better one first, or should I worry that they'll have removal and hold on to it until the later game?
So Magic isn't an always or never game.
Yeah, it's a very broad question. No, I was kind of setting you up for what you were going to say, so go ahead.
Magic isn't really an always or never game, of course. If a card literally read 3 mana win the game, and your opponent was playing blue and had counter mana open, and maybe they have their cancel, then if you're both at 20 on turn 3 and there were no discard spells in the format, it would almost certainly be wrong to play it because you could just play your weaker card, and then maybe they tap their mana, and then maybe you play it and win the game, right?
Right.
But as a whole, cards aren't like that. And, especially when it comes to creatures, which only do what they do when they're in play, you generally want to get them in play as early as you can. So all things even, if I had a 2-mana 2/2 and a 2-mana 3/2 in my hand, and I didn't know anything about my opponent's deck, it's game 1, and it's turn 2, and, all they did was play 1 land, I would play the 2-mana 3/2 almost every time. Because they may not have a 2-drop, and now I'm getting in an extra point of damage. But when you go turn by turn, it really just depends, how likely you think it is that the opponent has a removal in their hand, how powerful the card living is, how impactful. One of the main factors is how impactful is this card going to be later. Like, if it's the example I said, a 2-mana 3/2 or a 2-mana 2/2, in the late game, turn 7, a 2-mana 3/2 is not going to be that much more powerful than a 2-mana 2/2. So you want to get that card out now, get in the extra points of damage, and then maybe trade it up with a 2/3 or a 3/3 if that's all your opponent has, as their first blocker.
Right.
On the other hand, if it's the other example I was using, 3 mana win the game, that wins the game at any point. So you want to play that when it's going to work, when it's going to resolve. I mean, if it was a creature and it said, at the beginning of your upkeep win the game, so it needs to live for a turn. You don't need to put that in play earlier. Now, if it actually cost 2, you'd probably want to put it in play right away because your opponent wouldn't be able to cast some of their removal. But let's pretend it was like a bomb creature, and so it was 4 mana creature. If you untap with this, you win the game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's going to win the game at any point in the game. So if you have a good 4-drop and that, but certainly way worse than that, of course. Let's say you had a 4 mana 4/4 and that. You may want to play your 4 mana 4/4 first, because if your opponent has a removal, they probably are going to answer that 4/4.
Yeah, they kind of have to, yeah.
Right, and then you pull the removal and play that. But let's say on the other hand, the more powerful card is 4 mana 4/4. When it attacks, you get some ability or something. Well, that card, it's not going to be able to attack on turn 7 necessarily because your opponent may have a 6/6 then. But on turn 4 on this empty board, if you play it and they don't have the removal, it gets to attack. You get to trigger the ability and you get to, realize the power from it. So the answer to this question is definitely not always or never. But in the dark, I'm going to play my more powerful card first, assuming I'm not going to worry that they might kill it, because you want to reap the rewards of it. And, the rewards of it, if it's a creature, are it being in play and attacking or blocking or using its activated ability or whatever it is.
Right.
So I would say well over half the time you should be playing your more powerful cards first, not sandbagging them. But always or never is certainly not the answer to this question.
This next question comes from Chris, who I'm really glad that Chris asked this question for this particular set, because I think it's been really topical for it. Chris says, to what degree do you think various pro-level drafters sitting at the same seat at the table would draft different decks? Is each seat, he puts it in air quotes, supposed to end up in a certain deck? Or would a few 50-50 or 45-55 choices early in a draft often lead excellent but different drafters down radically different paths?
It's really hard to say. It can always go differently. I mean, some seeds
there's like that butterfly
really
effect thing, right? Like you pick one card early and all of a sudden it changes everything else around not only what you've picked, but what other people pick and all that.
Yeah, some seats are really straightforward and easy, and I think the vast majority of people would draft them the same way. I remember Grand Prix Indy that I won back in 2012, so I was actually feeding Luis in that draft.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I met Luis, like he was an amazing Magic player. He wasn't a great drafter. And this is a couple years into us knowing each other and, talking a lot and, him improving at draft. And this particular draft, I drafted green-black, passing to him. There was a black-red player feeding me. Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly. I mean, I 100% drafted green-black. I believe it was a black-red player feeding me. Mm-hmm. So the best card in the pack that I passed him every pack was literally like best blue common second pick, best white common third pick, good blue common fourth pick, good white common fifth pick, right? It was just a super easy draft.
Yeah.
If that like fit with your first pick, then like, anybody who doesn't even play Magic could have drafted blue-white in the seat. And after the draft, he came up to me and he's like, I think I drafted really well or whatever. And I was like, oh, did you draft blue-white or whatever? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, what did you first pick? And he's like, Asperia. Do you remember Asperia?
Yeah, I do. That was the blue-white mythic rare, right?
Yeah, the blue-white gold mythic. Yeah. So he got past packs that had best blue card, best white card, best blue card, best white card when he opened the blue-white mythic.
That's great.
So, of course, I assume 99% of pros would have drafted the same deck in that seat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But then, you have, people first picking Manalith over Puncturing Blow, and we're going to end up with extremely different decks in that seat. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to end up with a red aggro deck, a red deck a lot of the time. They're going to end up with a control deck in every seat if they're first picking Manaliths,
Right.
I don't know the percentage. It could swing wildly. Also, there's a lot of teammate bias. Before each Pro Tour, I exchange ideas with all my teammates so much, and they exchange ideas with me, and we work back and forth. And though we don't agree on everything, not even close, our opinions are gonna come together a lot from all the exchanging of ideas. And then other teams often have vastly different ideas. So if me and one of my teammates sit in the same seat in a Pro Tour, we may draft the same deck, 80 to 90% of the time. But if you sit another equivalent skill pro, but on a different team in the same seat, they may draft the same deck 60 or 70% of the time. But honestly, I'm just making up the numbers because, I really don't know how many seats are like Luis's in that top 8, where you just first pick a blue, white, gold rare and then get past blue card, white card, blue card, white card, versus how many seats are harder and you have a lot of close picks and, you have a lot of chances to use, let's say, preference over power level because the picks are really close and kind of steer your own ship.
Right.
I probably would draft more different decks than most people by a lot because I tend to be very open to switching. I tend to try and take the best card out of the packs, picks 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the most part. Some weight for preference, some weight for my previous picks, but I definitely weight those things a lot less than the average pro. And then I try and see what's open, what's coming to me, picks 5, 6, 7, 8 at the end of pack 1, so that I really feel like I can figure out which color is being underdrafted at my table, which decks are available to me, and then I'll usually draft that. A lot of other pros tend to lock in a little more. Not that they're going to take their first pick and put blinders on, but, they're going to weight the cards after their first pick that are the same color more heavily than I will. And they're going to weight cards that are in their preferred decks more heavily than I will.
Yeah, which makes it more likely that they diverge or that you diverge from some, middle ground here, right?
Exactly. So it really varies a lot pro to pro, and even which two pros you'd be comparing. So it's really impossible to give an actual number answer to that.
Sure.
But I do think it's a substantial percentage of the time that pros would draft different decks in the same seat.
William says, Ben, what is your favorite all-time Magic artwork?
I got to be honest, William. I don't like the question.
All right. He throws you a follow-up. Do you tend to prefer older or newer card art?
So here's the thing. To me, it's a strategy game. And listen, everybody can love and appreciate different things about the game. I'm not hating on people who like the flavor and the theme and all that. It's cool. Everybody likes different things. I barely even see the pictures. I'm not even an aesthetics guy to begin with. I could actually tell a really quick, super funny story. I remember one time me and Michelle, my ex-girlfriend, were looking at paint, and she wanted an opinion. She was ultimately going to choose, but she wanted my opinion on which color to buy. And I was like, I literally wouldn't even give an opinion because I'm like, these are just colors. I don't really have a preference, I'm just not an aesthetics person at all. And pictures and art and paint and stuff really just does virtually nothing for me. So, I mean, I'm just not the person to answer this question. I don't know if you asked it trolling or not, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who'd be happy to tell you which picture they think is, the best or whatever, but that's not my area of expertise. I'm going to stick to the strategy and the value.
You've disappointed William, but all your fans are like, I knew he was going to say that. This one comes from Drew. He says, what are signs in a draft that I should be a monocolored deck? What advantages does that afford me in general, being monocolored?
Now, this is a good question. So it varies a lot format to format. The main advantage of being monocolor is that cards are normally more powerful the harder they are to cast. So if a card costs red, on average, that's going to be more powerful than a card that costs red 1.
Right.
And so if you have, all of your lands are mountains, that means you can cast your red card or your red 1 card or your red card or your, and so on curve every time that you draw that number of lands, way more often than if you're a 2-color deck. So what I look for in a format, whether or not I would ever want to go 1 color, is generally how many of the cards have those kind of casting costs. If you look at the current format, a Monket and Hour of Devastation have virtually no cards like that. There's no 2-drops. I can't even think of one. Maybe the rare from the new set, Rona's Last Stand or something that costs green or red.
No,
there's almost no.
No, the only other ones are gold. Yeah, there's Hapatra and stuff like that, but there's no double-colored ones.
Right, there's virtually none at common or uncommon, almost none in the whole format. So in this format, there's very little payoff to being 1 color. The other thing that makes you want to go 1 color, along the same lines, if all your lands are mountains, if a card says, sacrifice X mountains, get X, or deal X damage for each mountain you have out, or things like that. And once again, there's none of those type effects in a Monket or Hour. So in a format like this, I think you should almost never be 1 color because there's virtually no payoff for it. I mean, if you just happen to take the best card out of every pack and it just happens to be in the same color, then great. You'll have mana problems a little bit less. But honestly, in this format, if your mana is 9/8, you should not have mana problems a substantial percentage of the time. I mean, especially in a format with cycling. But even without, I mean, when the cards just all cost 1 colorless and 1, 2 colorless and 1, 3 colorless and 1, and your mana's 9/8, like, you should be good. So that's what I look for. You know, the harder the cards are to cast, like red or 1 red, or whether the cards have the text, you know, deal damage equal to the number of mountains in play, or reveal X mountains from your hand to deal X, or things like that.
Do you know that for a given set? Like, are you aware of that, generally speaking? Like, let's say you sit down for your draft at the Pro Tour. Do you have that in your head, a little flag in the back that says, this is a set where I wouldn't mind being mono black because of these payoffs? Or is that something that only comes up like as you're actually drafting and you go, I have a shot at being mono black. Should I?
Yeah, I totally know that right away, not even by the time the Pro Tour is rolling around. I tend to take a very holistic approach to limited. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not huge on I love this card. Because then you end up overdrafting it in decks where it's not as good as it should be, and underdrafting it maybe in the decks where it would even overperform. I tend to, when I look at sets, you know, what I tend to think about is, you know, how's flying going to be in this set? How hard are the cards to cast? What do I want my mana to look like? Is this more of a 16 land set or an 18 land set? Is this a 10-6 set or an 8-8 set? You know, land wise, do I play 10 mountains, 6 plains, or 8 plains, 8 mountains? You know, and yeah, like, you know, if, for example, it's a set where, you know, there's a lot of big ground creatures and not good reach creatures, then flying is going to be better than average. If it's a set where there's a lot of small ground creatures, then flying is going to be worse than average. And I mean, because, you know, if your opponent goes 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3, you know, you have to pay a little more for a creature to give it flying, right? Right. So if your opponent goes 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3 almost every game, right? How good is a 3 mana 2/2 flyer? It's not good at all, right? Right. But if your opponent's going to, you know, start on turn 3 with a 2-power creature and then on turn 4 play a 3-power creature, a 3 mana 2/2 flyer could be tough to race, you know? So, and it's like that with everything. It's like that with even just the power and toughness of the creatures. You know, like if you look at the creatures and there's tons, if there's tons of 3/3s, 4/3s are going to be a little bit worse than average, and 3/4s are going to be a little bit better than average. 3/2s are going to be a little bit better than average, and 2/3s are going to be a little bit worse than average if there's tons of 3/3s in the set. Right. So when I approach limited, those are the kind of things I'm trying to identify. I'm trying to identify, like, kind of as a whole, how every card is going to perform, not so much how good is this one individual card. That's interesting. Yeah, that's taking a much bigger picture view of it. And we talk about that sometimes in terms of, you know, what kind of, there's often a toughness number that seems to be more relevant. You know, like, for example, if you have 2 toughness, there might be 2 or 3 different common either removal spells or effects that can kill things that have 1 or 2 toughness. So I often think about how good are 1 toughness creatures in this set. Is there a pinger, you know, running around at uncommon that you're likely to see? Are there effects that say all your creatures get 1 damage or -1/-1 until end of turn or whatever it is? You know, are there cards that are throwing individual -1/-1 counters around? You know, I think about those things a lot too. And what you're talking about is sort of applying that just to everything, right? Which is, I think that's really cool. Yeah, and those are great things. Those are great things to be thinking about, because those are some of the things that can swing the most. You know, there are some formats where 2/1 for 2 is perfectly fine, and some where it's completely unplayable. Right. And that's usually going to be based on exactly what you were just talking about. That's a great thing to be thinking about every set. Jonathan asks us, Ben, Jonathan, come on, man. All right, well, I'm already into it. Ben, how do you get out of a dip in positive results? And will Marshall ever get out of his dip? It says. What a dagger. So is a dip in positive results just losing a lot? Is that what that means? That's what that means, yeah. I mean, look, ultimately, Magic's a high variance game. You know, we've seen some of the best players in the world. You know, I think Luis and Paulo are unquestionably top 5 players in the history of the game. Mm-hmm. Both of them had multiple years that were pretty bad. And last year, Luis top-8'd 3 Pro Tours, and this year Paulo top-8'd 2 and 1 Player of the Year. You know, and they both and you know, they both had years on the Pro Tour that were pretty bad. You know, I think that basically you just have to accept that it's a high variance game. You shouldn't even really think about whether you've been winning a lot lately or losing a lot lately. Ultimately, whenever I make a choice in a game of Magic, it's for one reason and one reason only, because I think it's the best choice available to me. It gives me the highest chance to win the game. And that it doesn't matter whether, I've done poorly in my past 10 tournaments or I've won my past 10 tournaments. Either way, every time I play a tournament, I'm just going to make every choice that I think is the best choice available to me.
Yeah. And you can answer the other part when he says, when will Marshall ever get out of his dip? Which is just a dagger too, because I'm not even in like a downswing either.
Well, I have no idea how much Marshall's been winning or losing since he doesn't play on the Pro Tour. But to be fair to Marshall, it takes a lot of high-level play for people to get good. I remember when I came back, I was not playing well. And this is, I top 82 Pro Tours. I played on the Pro Tour when I was a kid, took a few years off. When I came back in 2009, I was not playing well. It took me about a year of playing on the Pro Tour and playing high-level Magic and playing Grand Prix against good players and really the Pro Tour against good players before I really started to, kind of, I don't want to say outplay, but start playing on that level again where I was, waiting on the right cards to get the most value out of them and, really seeing the more advanced plays, well again. So, I think for Marshall, we'll never know how good he is unless he quits coverage and actually starts playing in all the Grand Prix and Pro Tours and things like that.
Yeah, and I can tell you I'm not like my goal is to get to the point where I could be the type of player that would let you get to that point. You're saying you were playing against players on the Pro Tour, and then after doing that for a while, you kind of started to get that next level stuff going again. Like my goal would be to one of the players there, just below that, and I'm not there. So yeah, that gives you any idea. All right, Matt says, "Hi Ben and Marshall. I've recently had a number of discussions with my buddy Adam." He says, often referred to by Marshall on the show as my buddy Adam, because I actually know Matt and Adam's my friend, about the importance of experimentation and out-of-the-box thinking in one's development as a flexible, limited player. He says, we both agree that newer players should stick to conventional archetypes and strategies, and we both agree that there's insights to be gained from trying out fringe strategies. The major question is, when? Do you have any advice about when in a player's development or when during the life of a format it's advantageous to depart from the path less traveled for the sake of unconventional experimentation? That's a really hard question. To say. Yeah, it's a super great question. Because, I'll tell you what we do on the show, is we are looking to try to improve a vast swath of players, right? We've got players that listen to the show that play in GPs and are trying to qualify for the Pro Tour and have played on the Pro Tour a few times. And we've also got players that are relatively new to the game of Limited and are kind of sorting things out and understanding, well, how does this whole booster draft thing really work? What are the fundamentals, that I need to deal with? And so a good portion of our shows are dedicated to more fundamental things, right? Which the goal of that is to take a player who's sitting in a local game store or at a PPTQ and hasn't got these things down yet and scoop up a bunch of easy, low-hanging fruit win percentage, right? I mean, if you take your average player who's never read an article or listened to a podcast or done anything, they just sort of figured out some Magic stuff on their own, and you take their deck, for example, at a local game store, and you just say, hey, can I see your deck? You're going to see a lot of fundamental mistakes. You're going to see people splashing when it's either unnecessary or not feasible. You're going to see people playing too many copies of cards in their deck that don't really do enough or that just don't have the impact that you need to have at that stage. And, among other things. And if you could go in and just change those things, their decks would perform way better. Make sure they're playing enough lands, make sure they have a good ratio of creatures and spells and things that actually affect the board on some level so that they're not just playing these blanks or these, wild reaches for splashes and things like that. They're going to scoop up 20 or 30 win percentage, right? I mean, they could easily be spewing off huge, Ben is at the point in his career where he's scraping around for a half or 1%, would be a significant gain for him. But when you're early in your career, you have a lot that you can pick up. And so that's a lot of what we try to hit on, for the show because it suits our audience. But the truth is that, what Matt's asking about is a very relevant thing for intermediate to advanced limited players, which is that, you are not maximizing your win percentage if you take the fundamental approach every single time. You need to be able to try out cards. You need to be able to try out strategies and understand how synergies on a deeper level will work rather than just, hey, I have the right amount of lands and spells and all my cards actually do something, right? That's going to get you a lot of win percentage when you're not doing that. But when you get to that point well, you do need to develop those skills further. So I like Matt's question a lot. Do you have a sense for when the time is right to do that, Ben?
Well, I would say it depends somewhat on what your goals are. As a person, I'm much bigger on learning and teaching how to fish, let's say, than giving a fish or getting a fish. Meaning, ultimately, I almost always think about the long run.
Right.
So I'm always going to want to try and develop all the skills I can so that, I end up better. But, that's not always optimal. I mean, let's say, you've practiced a lot with zombies and you're a good zombies player and you top, for your RPTQ with zombies and you've never done a booster draft in your life, the Pro Tour's coming up. You're going to play your same zombies deck and you feel pretty good about it. You'll edit it, but you know what you're doing. But you've never done a booster draft in your life. Are you going to learn all the in and outs in a month and become an expert drafter? No. So if you want to maximize your performance in that Pro Tour, maybe you're going to do that by learning all the fundamentals rock solid and just jamming the fundamentals and ignoring fringe strategies. But ultimately, if you have the time, if you have the energy and the passion and love for Magic that you see yourself with it, long term, and I know I was hooked from day one. I can't speak for anyone else, but I always loved games. I played other games when I was a kid. I started playing Magic and I was like, wow, this is the best game ever. Like, we did it,
Right.
So if that's how you feel about Magic and you see yourself with it forever, then, I would say you should try things out. You should develop the fringe strategies, even at the cost of short-term win percentage, because ultimately you want to end up in a spot where you can understand as much as possible on the fly and every format. And, sometimes, something will come together unexpected and provide you a lot of win percentage. And you really just want to develop your skills. You want to develop your ability to reason through this stuff when you're presented with it. Each new format, each draft. You don't want to lock yourself in to only understanding 80% or 90% of the possibilities.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough question, Matt, for sure. But I agree with Ben. I do. I think that the best plan is to, I would get your fundamentals down first, right? I really would, because I feel like once you do that, you'll have a much, much better understanding of when to break them and when to bend them and when to divert from that. But if you don't have that ability to just draft a streamlined sort of traditional limited deck with creatures and combat tricks and removal spells and not a lot of anything else, I think that you're giving up some percentage points, because there's a lot of times when you need to divert back to that when plan A doesn't work out, and you need to just understand the basics of combat and stuff like that. Next question comes from Carell, who says, "Hi, Ben and Marshall. Pro Tour Ixalan will be my first Pro Tour. Congratulations, Carell."
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Super awesome. Any tips for newbies at the PT, both regarding testing and play or the tournament experience overall? Also, this PT is going to be different because it will be more than a month after the pre-release. Does the approach to testing change in any way? So do you have any tips for a first-time Pro Tour player for Carell here?
Yeah, well, firstly, that's excellent for you because even if you don't have a strong team, Magic Online is always going to be good training. You're going to be able to go on and play drafts that are reasonably high quality, pretty comparable to the Pro Tour in the draft portion especially. I personally have found the Magic Online competitive league drafts to actually be harder than Pro Tour drafts plenty of the time.
Oh, is that right?
It's not. I don't think that my win percentage will be I think my win percentage will be lower in the Pro Tour, but that's because in-game people play so well in the Pro Tour compared to the leagues. The in-game play after the decks are drafted. But I've found it's harder to get good decks consistently in the competitive
everybody's fighting over the same good stuff.
Yeah, like I find that it's not always the case, and certainly not during the pre-release or release week. But, a lot of times, especially with the old 8-4s before the competitive leagues, a month after the format came out, the only people who are constantly doing those competitive 8-4s and stuff like that are people who know how to draft. And in the Pro Tour, a lot of people aren't expert drafters. A lot of people want a standard RPTQ. But anyways, back to the question. So with the set being out for a month, you're going to have a lot of good opportunity to play against good competition on Magic Online. And if I were you, I would take full advantage of that. I would be up in the competitive leagues, both standard and limited, constantly. I mean, as much as you have time for. As far as the tournament itself, I wouldn't worry. Magic is just Magic. Whenever one of my opponents is nervous in a Grand Prix or a Pro Tour, I tell them this isn't any different than FNM. Just play your cards. Your opponents are going to make less mistakes, so you're going to end up winning a lower percentage of the time. But the game is not any different. You know what I mean? It's not like if you've played, F&M, with your zombies deck 10 weeks in a row and then you go to the Pro Tour and play your zombies decks, your cards just don't do what they do. Your cards are still the same cards. They still do what they do, know? So, you're going to win less because your opponents are going to make less mistakes, and your opponents might bluff some things, or they might, call your bluffs more, or whatever. They're just going to make better plays all in all. But ultimately, your cards do what they do. So you don't have to worry like it's some different thing and you don't know what's going on. Just, don't get frustrated if you take losses, because your opponents are going to be good most of the time. And, sometimes you're going to be 1-3 or whatever. And you might not be used to that if you're one of the better players in your local area. Mm-hmm. So try not to get frustrated if you're doing poorly, and just go play Magic. Just go do the same thing you would do if it was a lower level of competition.
Yeah. Good luck too. That's really cool. And maybe come say hi too if you have a chance, Corral. Next question comes from Peter, who says, "Hi, Ben and Marshall. One canon of LR seems to be that level 2 playing is having a plan, and level 3 is realizing your opponent also has a plan. Assuming you agree with this premise, what specific steps or thought processes should a level 2 player be developing to reach level 3? Level 3 thinking makes sense conceptually, but what does that mean from a practical standpoint?" And yeah, I mean, that's pretty close to how we talk about it on the show for sure. Is level 1 is kind of just like understanding like what Magic cards do, right? How to tap lands, how to attack, and that kind of stuff. And then at some point, you stop just playing cards from your hand because they're in there. You're like, oh, you have a creature, I have a removal spell, kill it. You start thinking to yourself, well, can I deal with this creature in any other way? What if my opponent has something later? And you really start to plan out, how you're going to win a game or what's going on within the game. And then, like Peter said, yeah, we usually do talk about getting to that next level. And that next level usually is starting to think in terms of what is my opponent doing? What can I do to counteract them? That kind of stuff. But I can see where Peter's coming from. Like, how do you get to that point? Ben, do you literally think from your opponent's perspective while you're in the game? Like, do you actually just go, okay, I'll just put my hand down for a second and say, what if I was my opponent and I had a removal spell? What would I do with it? Would I be thinking, yes, I should use it on this 4/4 that I just played? Or would you think, well, I probably don't need to use it because I got this Death Toucher? Like, do you go that deep, to try to plan out what your opponent's doing?
Yeah, you have to, because, a lot of times you're in a position where, you're debating, let's say, whether to put a creature enchantment on your creature, and what you're trying to think about is, do they have a removal in their hand? And of course, you're not psychic, nobody is. So what you're going to think about is, if you were them, would you have used a removal on the previous couple turns, And and I think the biggest thing that would get you from level 2 to level 3 would be just thinking about why your opponents make the play that they make, because generally people make plays for a reason. Even players who aren't great, if they know what they're doing, they're going to have a harder time figuring out which play is optimal between close plays, but they still have reasons why they're making their plays. So if your opponent attacks you with 2 creatures when you have a bigger one out, and you block one and they bury it, they didn't have a pump spell, and then the other one deals 3 points of damage to you, they probably did that for a reason. And if that 3 points of damage put you from 8 to 5, maybe it's because they have a Lava Axe in their deck,
Yep.
And so now if you have a choice between, cycling a card that gains 3 life or casting it, maybe you should cast it because, they probably have a Lava Axe in their deck. Obviously it depends on the game, but the point is, you should be thinking, if they make a play that is in any way not just completely standard automatic on board, that makes just perfect sense, based on the most value on board, you should always be thinking, why did they do that? And if you don't know, if that's okay. If you can't come up with an answer, then just go back to playing on board and making the plays that make the most value. But when you do come up with an answer, that may allow you to win a game you would have lost, because maybe there are some options available to you now to make plays that minimize the value of the play they just made. And this happens all the time. It's something I think most people who know me would give me a lot of credit for, is really realizing the why and what my opponents are doing, picking up on what they're up to. And, I just think about it. There's not like some secret trick. It's just, of course, it's a skill. Some people are going to be better at it than others, but I always think about it. If my opponent does anything that just doesn't seem like the stone obvious best play on board, I think to myself immediately, why would they do that?
Yeah, and that really is one of your strengths, by the way, because, I've watched you play quite a bit. And whenever I've asked you, hey, why didn't you attack here? And I think when I ask you, I usually have an idea in my head about what I think. I just want to hear what you say and how you get to it, because I learned from that. And man, you're very, very good at being able to just say, oh, I thought he could have this, or this here, so I figured it probably wasn't worth it or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. Where, there's players that are, as good as you are at Magic that can't verbalize it. They don't have, people like you and Owen tend to be really good at being able to say, this is why I did the thing that I did. Right. And then now it's like, okay, I've seen you have these conversations with other pros as well, where it's like, okay, now this is a topic of conversation. Did you weigh these factors correctly? Was there something that you forgot? Did you overrate something? Now we can actually discuss it, where there's also a group of pros who are also excellent at Magic, but don't communicate that as well. Where they're just like, well, I don't know. Either like they have to backtrack and sort of reconstruct the situation, in their head, because they're kind of playing, a little bit more by intuition or whatever. But, yeah, Peter, great question. I really, by the way, Ben, I really appreciate your straightforward answer with that. I think that it's tempting to try to get cute and be like, oh, well, it's just, you literally just have to think about it, right? Like you just have to go over it in your head and do the work in the game to figure it out. And I think that's great. Dylan says, hi, Ben, big fan. What's the most important piece of advice you can give on helping with tilt? I think of myself as someone who can stay pretty calm in the face of a bad performance, but I've experienced quite a nasty losing streak recently. Hopefully it hasn't affected my game yet, but I'm looking for more ways to fortify my attitude. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we're all humans. We all have emotions about losing and winning. And, I personally have had a bad couple years on the Pro Tour, and, it's frustrating. And, I think ultimately, if it feels like it's variance, if it feels like it's your opponent's winning close games by top decking, or you getting stuck on lands, or things just not breaking your way, that happens. It's not making excuses. It's just something that actually happens in Magic, and you just have to accept it. A big part of why the game is the best ever is drawing a random card every turn, and having the random element gives you the ability to play to your outs and to bluff things and a lot of that type of stuff. And that also, an unfortunate downside of that is it also results in a lot of variance. If it's your own play, then I would just spin that positive and look for ways to improve. Personally, in the short term, I don't really get frustrated by variance at all. Over the long run, it can be minorly frustrating, but I know I've also been so fortunate over my Magic career that I could run bad the rest of my life in the Pro Tour and I could never complain. There are plenty of players roughly as good as me at Magic who have 1 Pro Tour top 8 or no Pro Tour top 8s, and I have 4. So I've been very fortunate in my career. But I understand not everybody's going to be able to take that perspective, because maybe you haven't been fortunate in your Magic career. But, ultimately, I think you just have to remind yourself that, part of what makes this game great, it's not the variance that makes it great. The negative variance is a byproduct of what makes the game great, but it's a necessary byproduct of it.
Right.
So you have to just accept that it's there, understand that you can't get mad about the things you can't control, the things that, just happen to be there. Now, if it's the things you can control, if you're punting, if you're making bad plays, then, take that frustration and that tilt and that anger and, remember, you don't want to feel that. And you're feeling that because of your own choices, not because of the variance. So go out and spend some more time and effort, training, watching more videos, getting feedback from your friends. I mean, there's various ways to improve at Magic. I mean, I think the best is probably going to be any sort of one-on-one if you have access to good players and you can ask them, hey, what would you do here? If you don't personally have access to that, there's lots of great content now. I'm not just trying to sell Channel Fireball, but, Paulo put up an article today, what's the play, where there was 5 decisions, and, he doesn't just say oh, this is the play. He reasons what you should be thinking about, what the important factors are and things like that. Even just doing all of those type of articles is going to really help somebody get better, because it's telling you what's important to think about. Honestly, in this day and age, I don't even know how we win anymore at the pros, because all the information is out there. I'm not even kidding.
It is way different than before, right?
When I played on the Pro Tour the first time, like I always felt like we knew things other people didn't. Now all you have to do is go to Channel Fireball and you could read my draft picks and Paulo's what's the plays and like, you know, what Owen thinks is the best standard deck and like, you know, but I mean like it's still a really hard game. But if you want to improve, the information is out there. You have to be deliberate. You have to find your areas of weakness by getting feedback. You have to be willing to analyze your plays, analyze your decisions. Even things that you think are correct may not be, and you need to be willing to analyze them and change your opinions based on the new information you receive. And there's tons of great content and tons of access to, and it doesn't have to be me or Paulo that you're coming to get better. You know, if you're a good player and there's another good player in your area, even if they're roughly your level, they're not necessarily going to make the same mistakes as you. So if they analyze your play, they're going to be able to give you good feedback also. They're going to be able to tell you like, hey, I wouldn't have done that here. Here's why. And, you know, you could learn from that. So ultimately, as far as tilt, basically, I can't tell someone how to not feel an emotion, but I can tell you that if it's a variance, you just got to accept it. And if it's your mistakes, then I would look to improve them if you don't want to feel tilt.
All right. Speaking of tilt, this next one, we got time for just a couple of more questions here. I do apologize to anybody who asked a question and it didn't get answered. I'll try to save these for the next time Ben comes on, because we did get a lot. This one comes from Soren, who says, "Hi, Marshall and Ben." He says, "Marshall said any question goes." So here's one for Ben. What lesson about limited do you think is the next Marshall needs to learn? Ooh, he's put us on the spot. I like it.
I got to be honest. It's not like I don't want to answer. It's like I don't know the answer. Like as much as I talk to Marshall, I don't play Magic with and against him very much. So I'm just not that familiar with his actual Magic game. Yeah.
I mean, I know I can try to answer it for myself because like, I know, I think I'm pretty in tune with my level of play and my weaknesses, and there's a lot. You know, I'm pretty hard on myself. Like, I'm a decent limited player. You know, I play on Magic Online all the time, and I'm fine. But, you know, I do interact with people like Ben and Owen and you know, some of the really top tier players and stuff. And, you know, I want to, that's where I want to be, right? I want to be as good as the really good players. I don't want to just be like pretty good. And I'm not even close. And in fact, I'm not even as good as, you know, some of the, you know, a lot of the players that are not as good as those guys. And so it's tough for me because I always have a really hard time balancing out how much effort to put in, because the way I look at my Magic playing scenario is that I think that if I really dedicated to it, I could make significant gains, but not so significant that it would be worth it. I kind of go back to the question that Ben and I answered earlier about applying limited lessons or Magic lessons to life. And I do the same thing. And it's a really tough equation for me because I have put a significant amount of work into getting where I am, but that was a lot of percentage points that I gained. And now I'm in that, you know, that part where, you know, you put in, you know, another 1,000 hours or whatever, and you're getting another percent or 1.5%. And for me, that doesn't really change things for me because I'm not a professional Magic player and I don't really want to be one. I like doing this stuff. I like being sort of the intermediary between the professional players and you, the listener, and doing that in the booth and doing that here on the podcast and with the YouTube channel and stuff, to kind of, you know, expose the game and bring more insight into that. I really like that role. That means a lot more to me than it would be to be like a gold level Magic pro, you know, which is like my realistic peak. And so, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not there. Like I would not, if I just quit right now, I would not be a gold level Magic pro. It would take me probably a year of playing hard and really concentrating on it to get to that point. And even then, there's a lot of variance with that stuff. So for me, I'm just in a tough spot because I know a lot of my weaknesses, but I have yet been unwilling to put the effort and time needed in to shore them up. And that just makes me feel weird because I'm like, I want to, like, I can see it. I know I need to, what parts I need to buckle down on. Like my in-game play is not good. Like I'm just, like I alternate between making solid to very good lines and plays to making just horrendous, you know, like just fundamental mistakes, in the game, either, simple mistakes that are pretty easily curable, like just forgetting something or whatever, but down to also strategic level mistakes. And those are the ones that I really care about more. And I do make them. I just look back and I go, I just did not have a logical reason to do the thing that I did. And if you would have messaged me with a screenshot of the situation that I myself was in and said, what do you do here? And I would have, actually sat down and said, okay, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's the things that I do. I feel like I would have come to the right conclusion. Yet when I was in the game myself and I didn't do that. And I don't know why. That's just a focus thing or a better fundamental understanding. And, those are the things that I would work on if I wanted to put that much more effort into it. But right now, I don't know. I guess I just don't. I just don't have enough time to do that. A couple more questions here. This one comes from Gabriel, who says, "Hi, Marshall. Hi, Ben. How do you approach a limited format that you do not like? There have been sets that I've drafted the hell out of at my local game store and on Magic Online, but also some that I didn't really like. They didn't click with me, and I wanted with what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do didn't work. So I was a little frustrated or sad because I like drafting, but the set took some of the joy away. Any tips?" Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you view things that way, Ben? Like, do you like and not like different sets, or are they all just problems for you to solve?
Well, I do like and not like different sets. The closest I've been to quitting Magic since my comeback in 2009 was in 2012 after Avacyn restored. I found that limited format to just be so grossly unplayably bad.
It's considered the worst one of the modern era.
I didn't even know that. But I mean,
Yeah,
it just had very little removal. Some of the commons were 8s and most of them were 4s. And Miracle is a high variance mechanic. Soul Bond, when you can't break it up, is a high variance mechanic. I mean, it was just so not fun. So, I mean, my approach is, when a set comes out, it's problem solving because I have to prepare for the Pro Tour. Afterwards, I might do 100 drafts after the Pro Tour, or I might do 0, depending on how fun the set is.
Okay.
It's almost never 0. Avacyn Restored is one of the only times that actually happened, to the point where I was actually thinking about quitting because I wasn't going to play Magic, and I didn't play Magic for a couple of months. But then the next sets came out and they were substantially better. And, my friends were just like, well, it's cool that you didn't want to play any more Avacyn Restored. I understand that was horrible, but don't quit because of that. Now we're on to the next set and it's much better. Check it out. And I was like, okay. So, but I mean, as far as approach, it's basically every time a set comes out, you're problem solving, you're trying to figure out exactly, what are the good decks, how good is each card, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then, you're competing in the Pro Tours, the Grand Prix, whatever, so it doesn't really matter how much you like it or don't. I mean, it matters in the sense that, I wouldn't even, if I didn't enjoy most of the sets, I would quit Magic for sure. Because ultimately, there's just not that much money in the Pro Tour. We play this game first for love of the game, second to compete. Or I do anyway. I can't speak for everybody. But assuming that, I'm going to be playing on the Pro Tour and I'm going to be competing, then every set, regardless of how much I like it, is just a problem to solve when it comes out. And then the only thing I'll do differently is, sometimes I'll do hundreds of drafts after the Pro Tour and sometimes I won't do very many, just depending on how much I like the set.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's similar in that when the set comes out, I'm in work mode as well, though it's to prepare to commentate the Pro Tour and the GPs that happen around the Pro Tour. So I don't care whether I like the set or not. That's a work thing. And I'm going to memorize the cards and figure out what they do. And I'm going to get as many drafts in as I can before I sit down in that booth at the Pro Tour so that I have intelligent things to say about it. I'm going to talk to as many pros as I can. I'm going to try to go to a limited meeting if the Channel Fireball team will let me in, just to be a fly on the wall and listen. I just want to have as big of a picture view as I can about what people think about the format and what I think about the format.
For the record, we already discussed that, Marshall. You're barred from any limited meetings next year.
Darn it, really? I'm out?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We specifically had a long conversation about it and decided no more Marshall in those meetings.
This is brutal. All right. Well, I'll have to find some team, maybe down the totem pole a little further. But yeah. And, so that's business time. But, when I get done, I have to make some videos for Channel Fireball and stuff. But I'm the same like Ben. I'll draft the format 50, 60, 70 times after that's over because it's what I do. I don't really like to watch TV. And, if I'm at home and just kind of want to hang out, I'll fire up a draft. It's almost just, muscle memory at this point. But that, it does greatly matter if I like the format or not. And usually it takes me a long time because the truth is that any draft format's a tough puzzle to solve. And it takes me a while before I really figure out whether I like it or not anyway. And by the way, I really like the one we're in right now. All right, one more question.
Hour's amazing.
Hour's great, right? Yeah, I really enjoy it. Yeah, it represents the perfect middle ground from my perspective, where there's viable strategies in all. You can be a fast deck if you want, or you can be a slow deck. You can, take on risk and go crazy and play 4 or 5 colors, but you can still make that work. Or you can even play what you would recognize as a fairly straightforward creature-based, mid-range deck. And also, people always ask me, well, what color's the best and this type of stuff. And I don't know what's wrong with me, but my brain doesn't usually think in those terms, about exactly, I don't just start forming. I have to actually do an exercise with myself to figure out which color's the best, where I look at all the commons and kind of group them and then compare them. Because I don't know why, but when I just draft and when I think about it and I talk about the cards, I don't come up with this big picture thing where it feels like all the other people that really care about limited do. But anyway, my point was, I like the fact that in Hour of Devastation, I don't have a super strong opinion about, oh, this color's terrible or this color's great. I feel like I can play any of the colors and not feel like I'm just giving up the world. Do you agree with that, by the way, Ben? I'm curious.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, I definitely agree with that about Hour, but I was going to say, as far as the big picture thing, which color is the best is actually something I do very little of. I actually completely agree with you, because here's the thing, it doesn't actually matter what color a card is, it matters what it does. So, so ultimately, and ultimately draft finds a natural balance. If red is the best color, that's probably because it has the best commons, and then the most people at the pod open those commons because there's the most of them, and then they take them. So they'll end up being 4 red players if it's the best color, and if white's the worst color, they'll end up only being 2 white players. So then ultimately it doesn't matter much if you're red or white, as long as there's that balance where there's 4 people playing the best color and 2 playing the worst color. So personally, I don't think that much either about which color is the best. I just try and think a lot about which type of decks are functioning. And this format, as you said, is fantastic. I mean, I've been treating myself to a draft usually every morning before I get started practicing Standard. And yesterday morning, I 3-0'd with a Boros deck with 8 2-drops, just a 2-color aggro deck with a great curve.
Yeah.
This morning I 3-0'd with a 4-color green, blue, black, red control deck, splashing, everything and cycling galore, and just a really, couldn't be more opposite decks, just 2-color Boros beatdown, 4-color cycle, walls, late game, do it all, you know what I mean?
See, I love that. Yeah, a format that can offer those two ends is generally good. Yeah, the one thing about the colors that does stand out is if there's a color that's really far out of whack. If it's really bad or if it's really good, then I tend to notice that. But that's happened very rarely, only on a few sets, in recent memory. Okay.
Yeah, I'll notice it, but I just don't usually find it very important. What's important is how to make good decks out of every color, not which color is best.
Right. All right. Last question comes from Brian. He says, Ben and Marshall, this is an interesting one. He says, how do you personally balance the magic aspect of your life with dating and relationships? Do you only date magic players? Do you specifically avoid dating magic players? He says, I feel like I've handled this balance badly in the past, so I'm always curious to hear how high-level players and commentators handle it. Seems like people have many different approaches. Thanks, guys. Love the show. You don't have to talk about this, obviously, Ben. It is a personal question, and I did not prep Ben. I like asking Ben the questions kind of off the hip here so that I get the full Ben Stark answers and nothing too prepped here. But this one is a personal question, so don't feel compelled to answer it.
I mean, I don't mind a little bit. I won't go too detailed, but I've never really dated a Magic player. I think if you could have your primary hobby, job, passion, and life in common with your partner, you're probably going to have a better relationship than if you don't. I would love to date a Magic player. Personally, I've had my share of relationships. I don't feel like Magic has been the fact that they didn't play Magic was the problem, but I feel like we didn't have a ton in common necessarily. And if we had magic in common, that would have helped. It would have given us another thing to do together and talk about together, and, would have just helped strengthen the relationship.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. For me, it's certainly not a requirement of somebody that I date that they play Magic. That, in fact, I see a lot of upside to them not, because I'm so immersed in it all the time, and it is my job, right? It is a thing that, like, it's kind of nice to be able to step away from it every once in a while and just talk about not Magic stuff. But at the same time, it is a unique little universe that we live in. And having somebody who understands how that works and why things happen the way they do, or being able to tell a work story, for example, to somebody, who doesn't. I imagine, if your significant other was a lawyer and they came home and they started telling you about some policy thing, you just glaze over because you're like, I don't understand any of this. Like this, I can't relate to the story you're telling me. I'm sure it's funny, but I just don't get it. Magic's the same way. It sounds like a different language if you try to talk to somebody who doesn't speak it, and you don't want to have to spend 20 minutes just to tell, a short story about work. So that probably is would be a bonus for me to do that. But I don't think it's really necessary either. Like I don't view it that way. What were you going to say, Ben?
It's funny because you said, like, it could be a negative because you want to step away and talk about and get away from it because you do it so much and everything. And like, I'm just sitting here thinking, what? Like all I want to do is think about and talk about Magic. It's in no way, shape, or form a requirement for me to date somebody that they play Magic. But to me, it's like strictly upside because I never want to stop thinking about it, talking about
Don't
it.
ever change, Ben. We love you, man. You're the best.
I literally just think about, like, can I be thinking about talking about Magic now? No. What am I doing wrong right now?
Right. That is the best possible answer for that question. I love it. All right, let's wrap up the show there. Before we take off, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. We mentioned them during the course of the show, and of course at the front. Ben and I are both big on Channel Fireball. We love the website and we love what they do over there. Make sure that you visit them. Again, Ben mentioned it. There's so many great resources to get better. In fact, Ben had an article that went up a couple of days ago, What's the Pick? An Hour of Devastation, Pack 1, Pick 1 with Ben S. And, he goes over 5 different packs and does basically like a crack-a-pack where he breaks down the cards that he likes, he doesn't like, what he thinks about the pack and that kind of thing. I mean, this is the kind of insight that when Ben started on the Pro Tour, you just couldn't get. And now you get it for free right there on the front of channelfireball.com. It's sitting there. In fact, I'll put a link to that particular article in the show notes for people that want to find it. But there's a lot more. Right? That, William Huey Jensen, one of the best players ever, he's got an article like that up as well. There's an article called No More Tilt by somebody named Will Jonathan up. That, these are the things that we talk about on the show. I have a draft video where I goof grab my Pack 1, Pick 1 on accident. Like, you cannot replace this stuff. In fact, Ben, you had another draft video go up too, right?
Yeah. My second one just went up. My third one should go up within a week. Channel Fireball content is amazing. I mean, it really, like, I've been with them for 7 years, and, just seeing the endless supply of great videos, great articles, great strategy. Like, I'm not saying this, I don't own Channel Fireball, they just sponsor me, but, like, they're really, really, really amazing content. Like, I mean, I was saying it earlier, I really don't understand how we even win anymore because everyone tells the truth. You can just read through the what's the plays, understand Paulo, one of the best players ever's thought process on things, read through the what's the picks, understand exactly what me and William Jensen would take and our thought process. Read through, Reader Owen's latest standard video or article and learn how to play the best standard decks. You know what I mean? It's unreal, yeah. It's all there. It's just amazing. Right. And it's amazing free content, and it never ends. Every day they put up multiple articles and videos. That's right.
And of course, while you're there, you can pick up singles, you can pick up supplies, you can get limited resources, sleeves, and deck boxes if you want those. All different types of stuff over at channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, it's easy. I am Marshall_LR, and you are Benes8528.
That's me, Benes8528.
Man, I just snapped that off. That is, I must have been following you on Twitter for a long time. You didn't used to use it much, but you've been much more active on it now.
Yeah, I got into using it heavily maybe a couple years ago, maybe like 2 years ago.
Yeah. And so you can find Ben there. Ben, I wanted to say thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate you coming on. We always love having you on as a guest.
Thanks for having me. I love being here.
All right, that's going to do it for this one. We'll be back at it again next week. We'll see you then. All right, sign off time. We are going to play LSV. This is Let's Stump Vargas. So, except for that we're stumping Ben S. instead. Ben, I'm going to open a booster pack from Magic's Past, and I'm going to read you the names of the cards, and you have to tell me what they do.
Okay, this is probably going to be dicey.
Oh, yeah. This one comes from Brendan, who says, LSV needs some practice. That was embarrassing. Well, we're going to use this one on Ben. Ben, do you want to know what the set is, or do you not want to know?
Does it matter?
I don't know. It matters if you drafted it or not.
Well,
Right.
if I know what the card is, I assume I'll know what set it is.
All right, Embalmed Brawler.
Yeah, it's definitely a black creature, like a 3-mana 2/2 zombie or something.
It is.
Like that.
It is. In fact, it's all of those things.
It has an ability, though. What is the ability? I don't remember the abilities from that set. Yeah, tell me what set it is so I can try and remember.
It's from Legions. Which I think, was this a set that was all creatures?
Yes.
Or is that a different...
No, you're right. It's the all creature set.
Okay.
I think that's the one with like Timber Watch Elf and stuff.
Yeah. I've never even heard of this ability. +1. Oh.
Yeah, I don't remember the ability.
It's Amplify 1?
Okay, Amplify is when it comes into play, you can reveal creatures of that type, and it gets +1/+1 for each one you reveal.
Oh, yeah, okay. Uh-huh.
And yeah, that makes...
And it says, whenever it attacks or blocks, you lose a life for each counter on it. All right, what about Skirk Marauder?
That one's cool. That one's a morph. It's a well, they're all 3-mana to morph. I don't know the front casting cost because you never played that thing not morphing it. But
okay.
It's a 2/1, and if it does damage to the opponent, then it does 2 damage to one of their creatures, I think. Something like that? Or is it when you unmorph it, it just does 2 damage? Yeah,
it's when you unmorph it, it does 2 damage. The
one that does 2 is from the previous set. When it does damage to the opponent. That one it's a goblin.
Yep.
I think it's a 2/1, and it's 3 to unmorph. And when you unmorph it, you just do 2 damage.
Everything you said is true. It costs 1 and a red. But this part of that? Was there another one in the set that was like a 2-powered first striker or something like that?
Yes, in the previous set, in Onslaught, they had the one Skirk Commando that was the one that does 2 damage to a creature when it hits them, and Battering Craghorn, which on morph does a 3/1 first strike. So you could put your opponents in a bit of a pickle by attacking with a morph, and then if they block, you could unmorph Craghorn. If they didn't block, you could unmorph Commando. Of course, it's not a split card, so they could guess right. And you would have to bluff sometimes, if they played like a 3/3 and they had a tap 2/2 flyer, if you attack with the commando and they block with the 3/3, you're just binning your commando. But if, they're scared it's a Craghorn and they don't block, you're killing their 2/2. So morph made for some really good gameplay.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And this is Legion's the second set of that block.
Okay, what about Glintwing Invoker?
So the Invokers were a set of small creatures you could pay like 8 mana and get a good effect.
Yeah, this one is the creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying.
I thought that was my job
for the 8 mana.
Yeah,
this is your hint.
So you just want me to name the power and toughness or something?
What does it cost? Does it have any abilities? What is it?
I'm trying to remember. Glintwing Invoker. Well, it certainly sounds blue.
You know what I do when Luis gets stuck? I describe the artwork to him. I don't think that's going to work.
No, that's not going to help me. I'm not going to remember the art. If you tell me like the power and toughness or something, that might jog my memory. But you already told me what the card did, basically. So I don't know. Was that one? Was that one like a 5-mana 3/3 flyer or something?
Yeah, it was a 5-mana 3/3. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one was the 5-mana 3/3 and +3/+3 and flying, something like that.
What about Goblin Turncoat?
I think that's just a little black creature that you could like sack like a goblin to regenerate.
Yeah,
it's like a 2-mana 2/1 or something.
Yeah, that's it. Oh my god, you're good at this. I thought you would just get stumped, but you're actually just crushing these. All right, here's a card you'll remember: Nantuko Vigilante.
Yeah, that's the green morph. Yeah. You could unmorph it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. It's a 3/2, I think.
Yep, that's right.
It costs 3 to unmorph.
2 to unmorph.
2 to unmorph.
I'm still giving you that one though. Daru Stinger.
That's another one of the Amplify ones.
Yep.
It's a 4-mana 1/1 white creature.
Yep.
Amplify, it's a soldier. Amplify, like, number of
Yep.
soldiers. And it taps to deal that much damage to an attacking or blocking creature.
Dude, you are lighting this up. Did you draft the heck out of this set or what?
Yeah, I mean, 15 years ago, but yeah.
See, this came out in 2003. Stonewood Invoker.
That's the green Invoker. That one I remember for the most part. It's a 2-mana 2/2 Grizzly Bear.
Yep.
And then the Invoker ability is like it gets +5/+5 in Trample.
Just +5/+5.
Just +5/+5.
Yeah, but I'm giving you credit for that. Whipgrass Entangler.
I don't know if I remember this one. Say that name again.
It's called Whipgrass Entangler. Excuse me.
Yeah, I don't have any recollection of this one. Give me a hint.
This is it's white. It's a 1/3.
I don't know what that does.
Okay, so it's 2 and a white for a 1/3. It has activated ability 1 and a white. Until end of turn, target creature gains. This creature can't attack or block unless its controller pays 1 for each cleric in play. It's weird.
I should have known that. One of the key draft archetypes in that format was clerics.
Ooh, dropped a good one. What about Quicksliver?
Quicksliver. Okay, well, slivers were in the set. This is probably the blue one. Quicksliver. It's like a 4-mana 3/3 blue sliver or something.
This is green.
I don't really. Green Quicksliver. I don't remember the card.
It's 1 and a green, 1/1, and it has a lot of text, but it basically has flash, and it gives all other slivers flash.
So it's a 2-mana 1/1 flash sliver that gives all your other slivers flash.
In all slivers flash. Yeah. Any player may play sliver cards at any time he or she could. It's because that was before the slivers got selfish.
Yeah, I didn't remember this one at all.
Skin Thinner.
I think that was one of the really good cards. It's like a black morph that you can on-morph to kill a creature.
Yeah, you're right. Wow, this is a really good card. This is a common?
Yeah, it's like 3 mana to on-morph or something, and it just destroys like a non-black creature.
Yeah, it's 5 mana, but it destroys a non-black creature that can't be regenerated, and it's a 2/2. It's a 2/1. Yeah, I'm giving you that one, though. You knew what it was.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that was one of the better cards in the format. That's why I remember that one.
Yeah, that's a great card. All right, here's the uncommons. Epheto Exterminator. It's APHETTO. I'm assuming it's pronounced Epheto.
Is that the one that on morphs to give -3/-3?
Yes, it is. Wow, this is a good card too.
It's a medium-sized black creature. I don't remember the exact power and toughness. Maybe like a 3/2 or something. Yeah, it's a 3/1. And it's how big?
It's a 3/1.
3/1, and it unmorphs like for some reasonable casting cost. I think like 4 or 3, and it gives -3/-3 to a creature, something like that.
Yep, that is exactly right. Warped Researcher.
Warped Researcher. No, I don't remember this one at all.
Wow, that's a weird card. It's 4 and a blue for a 3/4. Whenever a player cycles a card, it gets flying and it gets like hexproof or shroud. I've never seen that.
Okay. Yeah, virtually no recollection of that one for some reason.
Liege of the Axe.
Liege of the Axe. It sounds like a little red creature, but I don't really remember this card.
Oh, this is a cool card. Or no, this is actually not that cool a card. You want to know what it is?
Yeah, I don't really remember this one.
It's 3 and a white for a 2/3 with vigilance. It's also
I don't remember this card at all.
It's a morph. The morph cost is 1 and a white, and when it gets turned face up, you untap it. This is not that great. All right, we've got a foil. Oh, it's a cool old school like border only foil. It's called Goblin Lookout. This is a common, by the way.
Is that the one that looks at the top card of your library or your opponent's library?
No, I don't know why this card is called Goblin Lookout.
There was some card like that, but I don't remember this one either.
This is 1 and a red for a 1/2. It says tap, sack a goblin. All goblins get +2/+0 until end of turn. All right, here's the rare. Havoc Demon. This looks like a bomb. I'm assuming this was a bomb for the time frame, though. I didn't play then, so I'm gonna let you tell me.
I mean, is it just like some kind of 6-mana 5/5 or 6/6 flyer where you have to sack a creature every upkeep or something like that?
No, that's a really good guess. It's 7 mana. I know you're just guessing. It's a 7 mana 5/5 flyer. And when it dies, all creatures get -5/-5 until end of turn.
Okay, yeah, that's a cool card. I probably should have remembered that. I'm sure that was a limited bomb.
All right, let's see how you did. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 correct. Nice work. That means you got 7 incorrect.
You were generous with correct, but I appreciate that.
Hey, I'm the arbiter of this. I decide what's correct here. So
I mean, it is hard. It is 50.
Nice work, dude. No, seriously. Like, I don't think people understand how hard this game is. Like, just hearing a name is incredibly difficult. Though I hope they played along at home as well. All right, Ben. Nice work. You had a strong showing in your first Let's Stump Vargas.
All right. Thanks for having me on and trying to stump me.